Hi, welcome to today's edition of It's Your Business. My name is Cindy Doherty, and we are pleased to welcome as our guest today, Dan Kuderer. Dan is an employee with Saxon Financial Consulting. He is a wealth coach, and today we're going to talk about financial planning. So, Dan, welcome to It's Your Business. Pleased
Thank you,
to have
Cindy. I appreciate being here, and thanks for your time today.
No problem. For starters, let's just talk a little bit about your personal background. How did you get started in this financial planning business?
So I have been in the Cincinnati area all my life. I'm a graduate of Xavier from 1984. And my career, for the most part, for the first 26 years, was with various businesses here in Cincinnati. So I came out of Xavier with an accounting degree, was in the financial end of business for 10 years, small private and public companies, accounting, senior accounting, CFO positions. And in my early 30s, had an opportunity to make my first career change and get into sales. Okay. And so for about a 16-year run, I was a part of the healthcare industry, both in direct sales and also sales management. Okay. And then about 4 years ago, working for a Fortune 100 company, went through a downsizing and kind of looked at my next career change in my late 40s. So
it really worked out to be an opportunity rather than a crisis at that time for you to change, kind of shift into a new gear.
It really was. And I think compared to a lot of folks who go through career change where it isn't necessarily a positive experience, mine was a huge positive experience. I worked for a great company. I knew the downsizing was coming. I think for about 2 years, I really struggled with believing that I needed to do something different. And yet, I enjoyed the job. I made good money. And honestly, they were going to have to push me out the door, which the downsizing did. And so for me, having all the years in the healthcare industry, I knew with a lot of the changes going on with the Affordable Care Act and things to come, which we see changes even 4 years later.
Sure.
I really wanted to get out of the healthcare industry and in the midst of making a career change, really just get into something completely different than what I'd been doing for the last 16 years.
Well, it seems like you gained a lot of perspective throughout the career. You kind of switched from accounting and then to sales, and then you were part of the health care industry. So by this time, I think you had a very broad perspective on what all of that entails, and then as a result, where you wanted to go personally. And at that point in your life, probably could do that.
I could, and I think as I think back to that career change, my wife and I are empty nesters. Our kids were out of college. They were out of the house. And so for me, I didn't go into career change necessarily thinking I was going to become a business owner, but financially and in other areas, I really was at a point where if I could take the risk of starting my own business, 4 years ago was a perfect time for me to go through that and financially for Anita and I to go through that as a family. And so 5 years earlier probably wouldn't have been a good time to consider owning a business and entrepreneurship. But I just remember thinking in the midst of this, I could accept failing in a business venture. What I couldn't accept was looking back and saying, what if?
Right.
And so that was a huge influence on me in going through this career change. And as I even share with a lot of people today in that same situation, career change certainly can be a scary thing. For me, it was absolutely the best thing that I could have gone through, both personally and professionally.
That's great, and the timing for you, as you said, was really good in terms of the kids being gone and not being as great a risk as it might have been earlier in your career.
Right.
So you mentioned going into business for yourself, and when I first introduced you, I said you worked for Saxon Financial Consulting. But really, you have a business under that umbrella. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah. So I do own my own business, which is the Cooter Financial Group.
Okay.
I work through Saxon Financial really as a means of them providing the back-end support for my business. And so Saxon is a small boutique financial consulting firm.
Okay.
We do individual and group benefits. We do retirement planning. And then my part within Saxon is a wealth management. And so they provide an office for me. They provide back-end support, paperwork, compliance, a lot of the training that I went through to not only learn and understand financial planning, but also the insurance side and the investment side is what Saxon provides my business. And I love the resources that Saxon Financial brings to my business, because I do wind up referring a lot of my clients who come to me for the wealth management needs in other areas, especially related to individual insurance, as an example.
That sounds like a great fit. You get to run your show, and yet you have the support of the company, Saxon, in the background, which is
It is,
nice.
and I think as the partners of Saxon would admit, it does create a win-win situation for both Saxon and also for my business.
I would think so. Yeah, I think they would think that works very well.
Yeah.
Well, I know when you and I talked earlier, one of the things we talked about was you have a philosophy, a personal philosophy about financial services and about the people that you're going to talk with. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel about that personally?
Being in the business world, and especially in sales, you learn how much comes down to relationships. And so what was interesting prior to me getting into business, I did informal surveys with friends and family and people who would work with financial advisors. And a common theme that I heard over and over again is I hear from my advisor when we first get together and start working, but then I never hear from them. And so it's always been a philosophy of mine to build a relationship with the clients that I work with. And especially when you're talking about financial planning or recommendations on insurance solutions, or especially managing money for people, that is so much built on a trusted relationship. And so what people find in our industry is that there's a lot of advisors who will make recommendations based on something being suitable, but it's not necessarily based on what's best for the client. So there's a term in our industry called a fiduciary role. And all that means is that any recommendation I make is for the client and what's best for them. I'm compensated in a way that it doesn't matter what I recommend in terms of advice, a product, a solution. And as I share with couples and individuals who I sit down with before they hire me, is to say, look, people hire me for my advice. They don't necessarily hire me for access to products. And so for someone looking for an advisor, a wealth coach, someone who is going to give them advice that's based on what's best for them. That's what they're getting in that relationship with me to start with.
And I think you bring up a good point. I think people are sometimes afraid that it is going to be a sales presentation, and that's exactly how you make your money, by selling product. And they're scared of that. They don't want to be put in that position because it's uncomfortable. When really that's not it. That's not what you're doing.
And I like to say that people want to buy and not be sold. And so I have a very low-key approach. I think one of the strengths that I have as a wealth advisor is just the ability to build that trust. And, you know, when I talk to people about what I'm passionate about, one of the reasons I got into the industry and what I love about what I do is helping people be in a position where they can be generous with their money. And what I mean by that is that so many people today have money controlling them, and so few are in control of their money. And just as Anita and I are generous as a couple with our time, our talents, and our money, that's something that I want to help my clients with, is to be generous with their time and their talents and their money as well. And that's something that comes through, I think, in terms of what I'm passionate about, is finding that way that people can not only be in control of their money, but they can learn how to be generous, and certainly generous in financial ways.
So I see that as much more than financial planning. I mean, you're giving these people the confidence and a plan to build on so that they can do other things with their money, meet their goals, meet their needs as they get older and their lifestyles change. And I agree with you certainly about the trust factor. I know in my own situation, my financial advisor knows my kids, my parents, knows me, knows, the family dynamic. I mean, it's so much more than just, my calling him and saying I need to buy this stock or whatever. I mean, that's just not what it is.
Right.
I go to him for all kinds of advice.
Yeah.
And I hear you saying the same thing with your clients.
And that's a perfect example of the type of relationship that I like to build with my clients. And I think one of the things that's really important for people to understand is it's never too early to work with a financial professional.
Thank you. As you and I talked, when I taught high school kids, that was one thing that I just tried to really emphasize. So go ahead. You and I agree on this.
Yeah. So one of the common misconceptions that I hear from individuals and young couples is, I don't have any money to manage. Why would I work with a financial professional like yourself? And that's a very honest and great question to ask. And some common denominators, things that I see with young people that are why they need to work with a financial advisor or a wealth coach, is number one, many of them are dealing with student loan debt.
Right.
They've come out of college, they've gotten a job, they're making more money than they ever have, and they have $50, $70, sometimes $100,000 in school debt.
They do.
And they're like, how do I even get out from underneath this? Another area with young couples and individuals I see is needs around life insurance to protect their family in the loss of an income due to a premature death. Or for someone who is working and their family is depending on that income, the loss of their income due to a disability. And certainly with young people, they're not necessarily thinking about those type of events, but we know people who have gone through that, and we certainly read the statistics that indicate that those type of events don't exempt itself from a young person. And we've even seen data of people who have worked with a financial advisor versus people who have not. And in many cases, there's a profound difference in the financial plan that they've not only put together, but where they are. And maybe just as importantly, having that person outside of themselves that they can be accountable for in terms of their financial life.
I so agree with that statement because it makes a huge difference. My kids will go to the financial advisor where they might not come to me with questions because he's an objective guy out there. They don't have that emotional baggage going in to talk to him.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
It is. It is.
And you and I also talked about people being intimidated and not wanting to, not thinking they have enough to invest, or financial advisors are for very wealthy people, and why would I go to see one, and on and on and on. But that's a myth.
It is.
And what you're saying is dispelling that, and I think people need to understand that.
And one of the common feedbacks I hear from clients that I start working with of all ages is, I wish I had sat down a year ago, or I wish I had had this discussion 5 years ago. And, perfect example, one of the biggest target markets that I get a lot of questions from are individuals and couples in their early 50s who are saying, we're empty nesters, my kids are gone, I've got this time period over the next 10, 15, 20 years to kind of make up for retirement. I don't have a financial plan in place to even know if I'm on track to hit that, what I call financial retirement date. I think, as you know, Cindy, people today are not retiring from a job in their early to mid 60s like they used to. And the good reason is they enjoy what they do.
Right.
And so for me, the discussion is not necessarily retirement from doing something. It's what's that age that you want to financially retire, and if you don't produce any more income, do you have enough money to live off of and make sure you don't run out of money when you financially retire and no longer have that paycheck? And
you and I both know that Social Security is not the be-all and end-all. You have to plan in addition to that.
That's true. And the scary thing is, if you look at the statistics of retirees and what they are living off of, a fairly high percentage of retirees are living off of just Social Security. And for those who have money outside of Social Security, the average retiree has about $52,000 set aside as a means to supplement their Social Security income. And as we know, people are living longer, and that's a good thing, but people are also getting sick in their later years, and in some cases can result in a situation where they may have to go into assisted living or nursing home or even home health care.
Absolutely.
And those financial burdens could wipe a family out financially who's even done their very best to prepare for a worst case scenario.
Absolutely. And that's where insurance, again, comes back into the picture, too, to supplement some of those financial needs.
It does, absolutely.
The other segment, I think we've touched on the middle-aged individuals and couples working toward retirement, and we talked about young married couples. And the third was small business owners. That's another segment of the population that I think needs your services.
It is. And what I find is, for many entrepreneurs who are in that first 5 years of their startup, their number one focus is, I'm trying to build a business that's financially viable and kind of get through that first 5 years of survival. And really from there, It's very common as a business owner builds their business to reinvest into their business.
Sure.
I talk to a lot of business owners who are reinvesting in their business, and many will say, my business is my retirement check someday. And I totally understand that. As a financial advisor and coach, my role is to say, we need to diversify you into other investments outside of your business. I hope in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, your business is not only thriving, but it's relevant. But we could probably name many businesses that existed 10 years ago that are no longer here today. And so I just throw a challenge out to small business owners who are building a business. Think about divesting your future income into areas outside of your business, just because that makes good financial sense to be fully diversified. The other, I think, need and opportunity out there is so many small businesses are family-owned businesses. There's children involved in the business. There's maybe even grandchildren. And a family has owned and run the business for years, and all of a sudden, selling their business comes, onto their radar, but they have no plan in place. They have no transition to transition that business to a family member, a key employee. And so what happens in some cases is that business owner faces maybe a financial challenge, or they face a health issue. And now all of a sudden, they speed up this urgency around, I'm not going to be able to run this business forever. I really need to start looking at transitioning this. And so for me, I generally, as a wealth coach, have a small part, but one of the most important things I want to do for small business owners is just get them to start having that conversation within their business. If there are family members they can pass a business on to, what are things they are putting in place to make that transition easier? Are they putting legal documents in place that, even though it's family, you want to keep peace within the family?
Sometimes that's even tougher. I know.
That
it's family.
And so some of those things that need to be talked about related to business transition, they've created a legacy that they want to pass on to their family. And with some proper planning, there's really some easy ways to make sure that not only can that business be transitioned to family or key employees, but number two, they wind up getting a fair price for the business that they're selling.
And like we talked about before, especially when you're dealing with families, you need that objective voice in there. Families don't tend to work those things out really well among themselves sometimes.
You tend to hear the horror stories than necessarily the great stories that come out of being proactive around that transition.
And I think I hear a common theme throughout our conversation in that you need to start early. You need to plan for, have a contingency plan, discuss the options, discuss, potential problems and potential areas that you might want to plan for. But it all centers around taking that proactive approach and not waiting until the last minute, which I think so many people do.
It does. And I'll just mention this real quickly. It's not an area of expertise for myself or our firm, but one of the most common needs, and I would just say to the audience that is watching this, getting together with an estate attorney to do basic estate planning is such a huge need for families and individuals of all ages.
I agree.
It's rare that I sit down with someone who has estate planning and estate documents put together. I talk to my clients about this because in the process of hopefully creating money that they can pass on to their children or grandchildren, basic estate documents, including a revocable trust, are just givens nowadays. And again, because so few people that I meet with have this in place, I would say even if they weren't to sit down with me and have a discussion about that, that is a discussion I have with every client that I meet with and that I take on to say, I can't make you have this conversation, but here's some of the benefits of getting this in place, and especially in a situation where they know if anything happened to them unexpectedly, their financial life is not only in order, but it can pass quickly and efficiently to their family members that they want their estate to go to.
Exactly. If you don't want to do it for yourself, think about the people who are going to be involved after the fact. Now, I think that's such great advice, and I've just seen that so often where people have good intentions, but they just never get around to making that appointment and getting things put in order.
Yeah.
And that's not just for people of middle age and older, but, you know, young couples, you know, people that have a ways to go yet, but they just need that long-range plan.
Right, right. I agree.
Well, I think we're just about ready to wrap this up, Dan, but this has been so interesting, and I hope that our audience has learned a lot from your insights and your comments. And I think the important thing, again, is to just consider what your circumstances are and plan accordingly. And don't be afraid to be involved with a professional who can help you make those decisions and who can be objective.
Agreed. And one thing that you know, I want the audience to know is whether it would be myself or other wealth advisors out in this community, most, if not all, will sit down with someone and provide a complimentary consultation, even if it's just to give them a second opinion about some things that they're doing financially, and maybe ask one of the questions, why would it benefit me and my family to work with a wealth advisor? And so I just encourage people who are watching this program, sit down with an advisor and get some feedback. Maybe it is someone you wind up doing business with. Maybe the time may not be right for whatever reason, but I just want to encourage people to make that phone call, to get together with someone that they can get the feedback and just see if they're on track to whatever they're wanting to accomplish with their financial goals.
Establish that relationship.
It is. That's super critical.
Perfect. Well, we are out of time, but we thank you very much for being with us today, Dan. This has been great. We hope the audience has enjoyed listening to Dan's comments, and we thank you for joining us today. Please join us again for It's Your Business.